Thankfully, Amber and her manager quickly sprung into action. They asked a few employees to stay at the back door and asked another employee to delay Joseph so the manager could call the police. In a matter of minutes, authorities quickly responded and arrested Joseph Edward Duncan III without incident. When Joseph was taken away, Shasta began to cry. She was scooped up by Amber Dean, who asked her name. She shakily told her that her name was Shasta, and Amber hugged her tightly before handing her over to authorities. She immediately went about giving a statement. Shasta was then taken to a local hospital where she was evaluated and eventually reunited with her father. Authorities implored Steve to allow them to question Shasta, as Dylan had not been recovered with her. Steve, obviously desperate to find his son, agreed. When Shasta was interviewed by police, they firstly wanted to know what happened to her and her brother Dylan. Shasta told police that Dylan was dead. He had been shot with a sawed-off shotgun at the campsite. She told police that Joseph had accidentally shot Dylan in the stomach, then had to shoot him in the head because Dylan was so badly injured. She said that he walked up to Dylan and shot at his head from a point-blank range, but the gun did not go off. Joseph then reloaded the gun and fatally shot Dylan. He wrapped Dylan's body in a tarp, afterwards burning it in a fire. He also burned any items that had Dylan's blood on them. Joseph put Dylan's ashes in garbage bags and forced Shasta to help him dump them in a pipe that led into a river. Upon doing away with Dylan's body, Joseph said there was too much evil at that campsite, so they moved to another one for a few days. While at a new campsite, Joseph apparently told Shasta that she had taught him how to love. Because of this, he had an epiphany. He decided to take her back to Coeur d'Alene, where she was discovered at the Denny's. Shasta divulged to the police many of the unspeakable acts of Joseph, including the multiple molestations, which were later verified via the rape kit collected on the day she was rescued. She told police about the videotape she had to watch of Joseph molesting and torturing Dylan. Shasta also told the investigators that Joseph repeatedly threatened to kill them with the hammer he had used to kill their family, often pulling the hammer out for effect. According to Shasta's account, Joseph was, quote, sometimes nice to us and sometimes really, really mean, end quote. Shasta also said that Joseph apologized to them and raved about God and forgiveness. He also apparently told the children to call him Daddy during her time with him. Joseph told Shasta about other murders he had committed. Due to Shasta's detailed and brave interview, police were able to locate Dylan's remains on July 4th, 2005, only 2 days after finding Shasta. The remains were sent off for testing and were later positively identified. The medical examiner estimated that Dylan was killed on or around June 22nd, and that Joseph and Shasta had since been alone together for at least a week. 4 weeks after her rescue, Shasta returned to the Montana campground with police and showed them where the abuse and other events happened. After doing all she could to aid the police in their case, Shasta was released to go live with her father, Steve. He later followed up with the press and said despite everything she went through, she was happy to be home, seemed to be in good spirits. While Shasta was now home, safe and sound, the investigation into Joseph Duncan was just getting started. After talking with Shasta and learning that Joseph had told her of other murders, authorities started a nationwide review of unsolved missing child cases. Joseph became a suspect in cases for when he was on parole between 1994 and 1997. He also became a suspect in cases during the time he was free from prison from 2000 to 2005. Police were able to positively link Joseph to the murders of Anthony Martinez, Sammy Joe White, and Carmen Cubias. He later confessed to these murders, and police were able to corroborate his confession with evidence found on his computer. When police gained access to his computer files, they also found that Joseph had been writing a blog called Blogging the Fifth Nail. His first post was on January 4th, 2004. According to Wired, quote, Duncan launched the blog to document his comings and goings in case he was falsely accused of some crime or another. The first 6 months of entries complained about the challenges of moving through society while wearing the scarlet letter of a registered sex offender, keeping a job, finding a girlfriend, dealing with aggressive police, end quote. Joseph's last blog entry was May 13th, 2005. Defeating the purpose for which it was intended, it proved nothing in terms of what Joseph had been doing during the time he killed and abducted those multiple family members. However, the incriminating information from Shasta and the eventual confessions from Joseph himself show that he was definitely responsible for the following victims along with others. Sammy Jo White and Carmen Cubias were half-sisters by their mother, Margaret. Sammy Jo was born on December 16, 1984, to her father, Sam White. Carmen was born on January 6, 1987, to her father, Lionel Cubias. In addition to each other, the sisters had 5 other siblings. On July 6, 1996, the sisters at age 11 and 9, respectively, were abducted by Joseph when they left their Seattle, Washington Crest motel room, where the family was staying. The girls were heading across the street to get some food. When the girls did not come home, their mother searched for an hour, then called police. It is unknown how long the girls were with Joseph or when he killed them, although the method was determined by hitting them in the head with a crowbar. Their skeletal remains were found in February of 1998 in the Seattle suburb of Bothell. Although Joseph later confessed to these murders, he has not yet been charged for them. Another poor victim of the cruel encounter with Joseph was young Anthony Michael Martinez, who was born in Riverside County, California on December 9, 1986, to parents Diana and Ernesto Martinez. On April 4, 1997, 10-year-old Anthony was playing in a neighbor's backyard with his 6-year-old brother Mark, when Joseph pulled his vehicle into an alley behind the neighbor's house. Joseph got out of the vehicle and approached the playing children. He showed them a picture of a missing cat and said he would give each child $1 if they helped look for the cat. The siblings quickly said no and turned their attention back to their playtime. Then Joseph tried to grab Mark, but Anthony got in between the two. Mark fell down and lost a shoe. Joseph then drew a knife and put it to Anthony's head. Joseph put Anthony in his vehicle and took off. Next, Mark started yelling, "A man got Tony." Ernesto, Anthony's father, heard Mark and ran outside to find his son gone and nowhere to be found. He called 911, then started searching for his son. Only 2 weeks later, Anthony's body was found on April 9th in Indio, California, by a forest ranger. He was found nude, battered, and bound with duct tape, and it was apparent upon examination that he had been hit in the head with a large rock and left to die. Police found a partial thumbprint on the duct tape used to bind Anthony. The print was later matched to Joseph, once again corroborating his confession. The first trial was a regular county trial wherein Joseph faced charges for the murders of Brenda, Mark, and Slade. Upon being tried for this, Joseph pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping, as he had bound them with zip ties before killing them. Joseph's first plea came on October 16, 2006. Upon his admittance, Joseph was immediately sentenced to 3 life terms with no chance of parole for the kidnappings alone. However, as part of his plea deal, Joseph would not be sentenced for the 3 murder charges until after the federal trial for Shasta and Dylan. Following the federal trial, he was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole for the murders in November of 2008. The second trial was a federal trial because he transported Shasta and Dylan across state lines. Joseph pled guilty to 10 charges on December 3, 2007. The charges were as follows: kidnapping of Shasta, kidnapping resulting in death of Dylan, sexual exploitation resulting in the death of Dylan, aggravated sexual abuse of both children, felon in possession of a firearm, using a firearm in a crime of violence resulting in death, transportation of stolen firearm, possession of unregistered firearm, and transportation of stolen vehicle. Of these, 3 of the charges could lead to the death penalty for Joseph: kidnapping resulting in death of Dylan, sexual exploitation resulting in death of Dylan, and using a firearm in crime of violence resulting in a death. The trial to determine if Joseph should receive life imprisonment or the death penalty began on August 13, 2008. During the trial, Joseph represented himself rather than using a lawyer. Shasta, who had provided her statement and went through so much at such a young age, did not have to testify. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before they decided to sentence him to death row for all 3 counts. After the federal trial, upon which his life hung more precariously than ever, Joseph was then extradited to California in January 2009 to stand trial for the murder of Anthony Martinez. He was charged with kidnapping, molesting, torturing, and murdering Anthony. However, March 15, 2011, Joseph pled guilty to all charges in order to avoid the death penalty. Less than a month later, Joseph was sentenced to 2 life sentences without parole. During his multiple trials, Joseph told the jurors that he was on a rampage. He was going to kidnap, rape, and murder children over and over again until he died. Joseph admitted that he had plots to invade daycares, parking lots, campgrounds, and more. He marked target locations on his GPS device. He said, quote, "I was on a rampage. I hated myself. I hated you. I hated everything that you represent. I hated the system. I knew the best way to hurt you was the same way that I was hurt. An eye for an eye. Except that the system didn't take my eye. The system took my heart, and it took my innocence. And that's what my intention was to do it the same to it." End quote. Sammy Joe White and Carmen Cubias were his first revenge. Revenge meant as retribution for having to experience his first jail sentence. Anthony Martinez, on the other hand, was his revenge against society, again for sending him back to jail for a probation violation. As for Shasta and Dylan, they were targeted for another chosen reason of revenge. Joseph confirmed that he had previously driven by their house and saw them playing outside. That is when he decided to kidnap, torture, and rape them. Joseph is currently imprisoned at Terre Haute USP in Indiana. He has no execution date scheduled. The lone survivor of Joseph's murderous journey is Shasta Groene. Shasta has spent a lot of time petitioning for Slade and Dylan's law. This law would put convicted sex offenders in prison for life. They would never be released. Shasta's father, Steve, has helped with the petition. She faced a lot of backlash for this request, with many online attackers telling her that people deserve a second chance. Unfortunately for Shasta, she has faced many troubles in her life. She had already begun to follow in her mother's footsteps by indulging in drugs at a young age. In early 2014, she was sentenced to 12 months in juvenile detention for a drug charge. And in 2018, she was sentenced to probation for 2 misdemeanor counts of injury to a child after she left methamphetamine next to her 1-year-old and 1-month-old children. She was arrested again for violating her probation and was released on supervised probation. Joseph had one final request of Shasta before he was captured. That was to visit him in jail. Since June of 2018, Shasta has been planning to write a book about her experience and to release a documentary. Shasta, though broken, is full of hope and aims to confront her captor by telling him that he is nothing, directly to his face. She is currently engaged in living in Nampa, Idaho, with her fiancé and 2 sons. It's not always clear why people perform evil acts against each other, but what is known is that Joseph showed a regular predilection to it. His choices poisoned his soul and his future actions. But what hurt the most in the wake of his demonic behavior is the people he left abused or dead along the way. It's hard to spot behavior before it starts, but one thing is undisputed: the signs. In Joseph's case, were there. Someone missed the mark, and he squandered his second chance, just as he did his third, his fourth, and so on. It's because of people like him that people are unsure of rehabilitation. The truth is, though, that there first needs to be acknowledgement of what is wrong and what behaviors can be curbed with what methods. Until then, though, the people of today's world need to keep vigilant and protect themselves and others from the lurking stranger, normal though they may seem, whoever it is. There may be warning signs to find, so whatever you do, look for the signs. Thanks for listening to Devil We Know. Sorry we took a really long break there through the quarantine, but we are back, We'll start releasing every week if possible.